You are now listening to
Chakras and Shotguns.
Welcome to Chakras and Shotguns, the podcast that guides you on a journey of spiritual development and personal preparedness. I'm Mick, a marketer, energy healer, and prepper.
And I'm Jen, a former lawyer, yoga instructor, and lover of the metaphysical. Tarot cards, crystal balls, the Bible, cowrie shells, bones. All of these items can be used to receive messages from the divine. In today's episode, we explore the practice of divination. How does it work? Is it demonic? Can you use it for your own enlightenment?
But before we get into that, this feels like another great time to remind y'all that my beautiful, wonderful wife, Jen, is a dope tarot card reader. You can book a session with her on chakrasandshotguns.com. We have a 15% off discount that is running right now until the end of September. So use the code CHAKRA15 to get that discount. All right, let's start as we always do with a little bit of breathwork meditation to get us into a mindful place.
All right. If you can, find a comfortable seat. You're always welcome to lie down. And just take a moment to get present with your body, with your breath, with this moment in time. Maybe put one hand on your belly, one hand on your heart, or even rest your palms face down somewhere on your body. Allowing yourself to ground, to get still, and clear out all of the noise. Let's take a deep inhale together in through your nose. Feel your belly expand. Sigh that breath out through the mouth, completely emptying out your lungs and anything else you may be holding. Do that together in through your nose. And sigh that breath back out through your mouth. One more together. Inhale through your nose. And this time, seal your lips and gently exhale that breath back out through your nose. Now that you're a little more grounded, allow yourself to breathe normally and try to match your inhales to your exhales. Breathing is natural, it's innate, it's what we do. Being conscious of your breath is grounding, it can be energizing. So the breath is very powerful. Just continue to focus on your breath. I'd like to do in this time together a little gratitude exercise. We talk a lot about our intuition, but that innate part of us, just like our breath, carries us and protects us through so many moments. One of the most powerful gifts that our intuition gives us is discernment. So allow yourself to be thankful for your ability to intuit through the noise, through the chatter. And gratitude for this body for telling you when something feels off. Gratitude to this body when something feels amazing. That without even thinking, you have an internal system that responds to the stimuli around you. If you've ever felt doubtful about your ability to pick up on the energies around you or be thoughtful about the next move to make, or picking the wrong partners or friends or relationships, I would ask that you reframe it and give yourself a little love and gratitude for the discernment that you have, that you trust your intuition and you trust your ability to discern your experience. Let's take one more deep inhale together. And when you exhale, maybe open the mouth, stick out your tongue, lion's breath, let something go. All right, let's get into the rest of the show.
Great job, Jen, as always.
Thank you. I think it'll work nicely with our main topic today of intuition and using your intuition to discern meaning.
Yes, indeed. Let's get into it. So, divination. What exactly is it? What's the definition?
Yes. So according to Merriam-Webster, I always feel like I have to do like my fake glasses push. The definition of divination is the art or practice that seeks to foresee or foretell future events or discover hidden knowledge, usually by the interpretation of omens or by the aid of supernatural powers. It's giving corporate, that definition.
But it gets to the point, right?
Okay.
So I think if we look at like the course of human history, right, there are tons of ways that divination comes up as something that we were using as a species. There were oracles in ancient Egypt, for example, one of the most famous being the Oracle of Amun in the Siwa Oasis. There were also many oracles in kind of the Greek Roman time frame, and the most famous being the one at Delphi. So you read about that a lot in the mythology. Mm-hmm. The heroes go to the oracle and are told things.
I read a lot of high fantasy. Not all of it's smutty, but yes, they talk about Delphi in there. We even see divination in the Bible, but like a lot of y'all's relationships is complicated. So in Deuteronomy, chapter 18, verse 10 says, "No one shall be found among you who makes a son or daughter pass through fire, or who practices divination, or is a soothsayer, or an augur, or a sorcerer." Verse 11 says, "Or one who casts spells, or who consults ghosts or spirits, or who seeks oracles from the dead." So if you're Christian, that sounds like divination is a no-go. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Straight to jail. Hang it up. Episode's over. If you like what you listen to, please subscribe. 5 stars wherever you listen. Namaste. And so this would suggest that Christians shouldn't practice divination. However, what we see in Exodus chapter 28, that there is the use of divination of Urim and Thummim. I got some names up in here, boy. Biblical scholars don't know exactly how this divination practice was performed, but there are references to yes-no questions being answered by utilizing it.
Yeah, so what I've seen is that it's kind of like similar to other forms of divination where you kind of throw objects and then read them, right? But I think this kind of contradiction that we see with Deuteronomy versus Exodus, it really highlights something that I've been learning more as I've continued to kind of dig into the Bible, whether that's Bible studies or just like watching content on social media related to the Bible and its contents. And we've mentioned this guy a few times. His name is Dr. Dan McClellan. He is a Bible scholar and a podcaster. On social media, he talks a lot about how the Bible is filled with contradictions. We have been raised to believe that like the Bible is kind of like this stream of God's word that is infallible and it's complete. And in reality, it's really just like a collection of texts from various authors that have been compiled and edited really based on the opinions of whatever the religious leadership was at the time. So what we find are contradictions like this, which allow people to kind of cherry pick scriptures to fit their own agenda or narrative. And so, if your worldview is that divination is wrong and demonic, then, you can cite Deuteronomy. But if you feel like divination is a way to connect with God, then you can cite Exodus. I'm certainly not here to tell you what to believe, so I kind of leave it to you to decide.
Yeah, and you kind of talked about like the spectrum, or like how people will be like, the Bible is God's word, that's it, it's perfect. And like that is actually like an academic approach, or like there's like the infallibility, or is there some kind of theory around it where it's like, no, we take this text and it's perfect cover to cover, no notes. But then there are typos in the Bible. Of course, there's contradictions. There are things that it's like, I don't know if we have the proper context to understand this. Like, it's
been translated from language to language. So it's a game of telephone in some ways, where like the original meaning of words are not actually captured in the English that we read. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like, was Methuselah really that old?
Bruh, I don't know.
And I felt like, no shade, but I feel like our Sunday school teachers, more likely than not, around the country, around the world, we're not all biblical scholars. So I was like, he was really that old? And they were like, yes.
Well, there is an argument to be made that age is a social construct that actually works against our cells and our immune system. And that like the concept that we were born into of like dying around 70, 80 is actually not how the human body was supposed to age. So again, I'm not telling you what to believe and what not to believe. I can make an argument for Methuselah actually being that old.
Okay, I know we're taking a left and we're going on a side street, but I want you to remember that, because when I tell you that I'm 25 and you laugh in my face, like, I am reprogramming my cells.
Okay, but you can also just say I have no age. Prince never celebrated a birthday because he felt like by celebrating a birthday, it was signaling that he was getting a year older. So even the concept of a birthday was not something that Prince subscribed to. So what I'm saying is you can subscribe to being 25, or you can subscribe to not having an age at all.
You trying to get out of giving me a birthday gift?
I mean, that would save some money.
Anyways, back on topic. I do think it's really interesting, though, that, and I think this is why you have to read the Bible for yourself, but it's such a dense text that I don't think is easily accessible. And what ends up happening is someone cherry picks and points to something and you're like, oh, the end. Hang it up. And when I started finding out that there were contradictions or typos, or maybe this was a little bit more allegorical, like a fable more than like historical, I had to take a step back. I had to just be like, okay, wait a minute. You talked about your metaphysical Bible study a lot on here, and it really changes how you approach the Bible. And then when you extrapolate that, approach the people who have been teaching you about the Bible to govern your behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be heavy. It can be a lot.
So one more thing to point out in the Bible, there are tons of references to prophets and seers. We see many mentions of oniromancy. Not sure if I said that right, but it's basically dream divination. And we see lots of references to it in the Bible. Most notable being Joseph, right? He was interpreting lots of dreams. Even made it all the way up to the Pharaoh, right? This was an important element of God's communication with the people mentioned in the Bible. If you've been listening for a while, then you know that we believe this form of communication is very common in our time, right? People are having dreams that are prophetic and they're communicating with the divine in the dream world. They're even in their waking state sometimes receiving visions. And so that feels very real to me. And I feel like it's another form of divination, right?
But that would have had you burned at the stake in Salem by the same Christians who had the same Bible talking about, you know what I mean?
I feel that.
I also feel like, let me put on my feminist hat. I also feel like there's a little, like even today, especially in certain sects of Christianity, Black, white, and different, there are people like born in 1992 or whatever, and they're like, this person is a prophet. And they're like, this is the prophet. And it's like perfectly acceptable for this person to be a prophet. But if, like, my mom is weirded out when I tell her something that, like, if I mention somebody and she's like, why did you mention that person? I was like, I don't know. They popped in my head. And she was like, well, they just had surgery and they're not doing well. Why did you even think about this person that we haven't talked about in like 20 years? I don't like that. It's spooky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I had another conversation with a friend who was like, psychics, absolutely big no-no. And she's Muslim. And I was like, but prophets? She was like, prophets are everywhere. And I was like, so what's the difference? I do feel like psychics, we see more women psychics than men. Like, I feel like male psychics are more of a rarity. And it's all branding. It's like, you know, a man can be like, I had a vision. And sometimes that man be lying. And they'll be like, I have a vision. They'll be like, oh, well, let's give you your own sect of Mormonism or Christianity. And we're going to give you your own church. And you can do your revivals. But I think if a woman popped up and was like, hey, like, you had this dream and this is my interpretation of it and it came true, I think it would weird people out a little bit. It feels witchy.
Yeah.
The too long didn't read is, I think a lot of this is branding. I think that there is a knee-jerk reaction from the Christian church of like any type of divination, and we'll get into more of like what that actually looks like, is not of God, but we'll talk about the prophet Elijah all day long.
For sure.
So, something to think about.
All right, let's talk some divination methods. What are some of the common ones?
First up, my fave, tarot cards. We did a whole episode breaking down tarot, so if you haven't heard that one, go back and check out episode 46. Some quick things about tarot. Its origins go back to 1789. At least it's a little bit mysterious as to where it really came from. Uses 78 cards and can be used to gain insight around a variety of topics. And the way that I personally read tarot is not necessarily like you're going to meet a man, but really about going within and like your own blocks. So I might pull cards and it's like, you're not embodying the person and the life that you're trying to manifest and create. So, you know, stop nickeling and diming yourself and be like, I'm making this business decision that is a prudent business decision and it's going to pay off in the long run, right? So like, that's more the flavor of how I read tarot. Different people read it different ways. And for me, tarot is really a tool for me to use my intuition and like channel it through tarot, if that makes sense. So if you're interested, sign up for a reading with me if you want to know what the cards have to say for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best way to approach divination is that way, right? Like you're using your intuition and using a kind of a tool just to kind of help bring it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to speak on a couple of different divination methods. I recently took a shamanism class that was out here in LA, and one of the classes was all about divination. And so we were able to experiment with some different forms. And so I'll walk through a couple. The first one is called shagai, or sheep bones, and it comes from Mongolia. And I actually heard it also originated, I think it was Greece at around the same time, so they don't know who had it first. But it's kind of interesting that it was like the same divination method was popping up in two different locations around the same time. So basically how it works is they take these ankle bones from the sheep. So they take 4 of them and they basically roll them like dice. And there's 4 sides to the ankle bone. And based on which side lands upward, there's a different interpretation. So like they name them camel, goat, horse, and I think sheep might be the 4th one. And so if you get like 2 camels, a goat, and a sheep, that means something. Like so there's an interpretation, almost like a chart that you can kind of go through to determine what the answer is to your question.
I had a little bit of an aside. This is kind of off topic, just a touch. But you were talking about how it popped up in 2 different locations. And something that you and I have talked about at length is how pre-social media in the prehistoric times, like the 90s, how phrases, songs, jokes, how they like spread across the country. It's like, is it all just through somebody's cousin visiting their grandma in the South and then like their cousins were from different places? Or were these downloads? Like, who was the first person to draw that weird looking S that we drew everywhere?
I need an anthropological study on that S for
you
sure.
Know? What does that mean? Is it a sigil? What are we doing? Okay, continue.
So the second one I want to bring up, pendulums. And this is one that I've tried and I'm not good at. I'm still trying to figure it out. But essentially, there's a bunch of different places you can get these pendulums from. Some of them are made out of crystals, some of them are metal, and you essentially hold the pendulum and you kind of first want to establish what the movements are for yes and no. So you would hold it and say, show me yes. And maybe your pendulum swings side to side, or it does a counterclockwise circle. And then you ask to see no. And so that could be a clockwise circle, or it vibrates in a weird way or something. And so after you've established what yes and no are, you can then proceed with asking questions that are, yes or no, and seeing what the pendulum responds with. I've had 0 luck with that. So if you're able to do it, bravo to you.
Is it the flick of the wrist?
I don't know, man. I'll ask for yes and no, and I can't even get those consistent.
He's like, man, get out of here with that shit, man.
Then we have cowrie shells. Now, this is a method that I feel most drawn to. The origins really go back to West Africa. I actually bought a book years ago that I didn't read until very recently that really dives into cowrie shell divination. And then a couple weeks ago, my friend and mentor who we've had on the show, Kira Buckley, she actually gifted me some cowrie divination shells. So I started to experiment with them. Still trying to work the kinks out. So, I'm not saying book a reading with me or anything, but slowly getting into it. There are a few different methods for casting the cowrie shells. You can use 4 or even 16 shells. With the 4 shells, the questions are really simple yes or no questions. I don't know much about reading 16 shells. It's like the, advanced level. I'm not there yet, but I believe you can get more complex answers using those.
Yeah, when Mick came home from that shamanism class and was telling me about some of the things he learned, it made me think of this scene from Real Housewives of Atlanta. Stay with me. And I was like, Mick, did you remember this scene? He's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So I immediately found it on YouTube. It was season 4, 12 years ago. It was a little grainy. I guess HD has gotten much better since then. But basically, the cast trip that year was they went to South Africa. And they were in this village. And they met this medicine man. And he was like, I have bones. And he was going to throw them. The housewives were a little indelicate about the whole bones thing. And it was giving, snooty American. But anyways, he had a collection of shells. There were some animal bones, I think, but it was cowrie shells, maybe stones, crystals. There were some dice in there. And he threw these bones and he gathered every single one of them women together. Like the nicest part of the reading was that he told Candy, who was single at the time, that she was going to get married and that her husband was with her now, like physically with her. And she was like, what? Turns out Todd was a producer on the show and he was there on that trip, but she didn't know him. I think she kind of like was like, oh, that's Todd, the producer, but they had never really spoken. And the next day happened to be his birthday and they were all hanging out and she met him and that was it. That was the story. But it wasn't even like the way he told her. It wasn't like, oh, he's on this trip with you. And then she was like looking. I think she was just like, okay, like in spirit, that's cute. And the rest is history, right? And then he told Cynthia, you're going to get married. And they were like, she is married. He was like, okay. And at the time she was married to Peter, but then they got a divorce. So he saw the next marriage, presumably to Mike. And then they ended up getting a divorce, but he didn't get into all of that. But yes, yes, that was a reading for sure.
Yeah. So when Jen showed it to me, I was actually like, dang, this dude is low key reminding me of myself, because he had all these random items. He had the cowrie shells, but he also had some dice, like Jen said, and some rocks and some other types of shells and just all kind of random items. And I was like, is this what I look like with all this random stuff I got in this basket in my house? Is this the type of shaman I am?
Yes, it is. But I've loved you through it all. I've loved you through it all.
I appreciate that, babe.
A couple other divination methods that we wanted to touch on: palmistry or palm reading. Maybe one day we'll sit down with a palm reader. I've never had my palm read.
Me neither.
I have had my lips read.
They do that?
Mm-hmm.
Who did that?
This was like one of my first years at the firm, and we had an event because they were like, when the summer interns are there, they're always trying to come up with events to like keep them entertained. Uh-huh. And this was like a women's event, which I was kind of like, okay. And so there was a woman there and she gave you a lipstick, these little sample lipsticks, and you put it on your lips and then you kiss a piece of paper. And then she read your lip print.
So what if you have fillers?
It was magnified. I don't know. Okay, this lady was a hack. She was saying things that it was like, you want a man with ambition. And it's like, well, girl, no shade. We're all female lawyers. Like, sure, that's not. You want a man that could communicate, that's smart. Okay. And then I guess she saw how big my lip print was. I mean, she could see me as a person. And she was like, and you like a man with like a juicy booty. And I was like, excuse me? Yeah. So.
But you do be looking at my booty all the time.
I do. But it's not juicy.
I don't know. I don't have a good view of it.
Why did you just out me? Was the lady right?
You said she was a hack, but I'm like, maybe she wasn't.
Okay. Anyways, but maybe one day we'll sit down with a palm reader. If anyone knows a great one, slide into our DMs, send them our way. But what we found in researching it is palmistry is also called chiromancy. You would think that that would be about the back.
Chiropractic.
Chiro.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But no. And it's the practice of analyzing the lines, shapes, and features of someone's hands to provide insight about aspects of their life. There are lines called the heart line, head line, and lifeline that can be interpreted. They also look at the mounts, which are the raised areas at the base of your fingers. The last divination method we'll mention is the I-Ching. The I-Ching, or Book of Changes, is an ancient Chinese divination method that dates back over 3,000 years. Just think about the data points. It's a text that consists of 64 hexagrams, each composed of 6 lines, forming a total of 384 possible combinations. Practitioners consult the I-Ching by using a divination method involving either coin tosses or yarrow stalks. I've also seen like thin sticks. Did you ever play pick 'em sticks when you was a kid? Where you throw them sticks out that can and you had to pick them up without touching the other ones? It was like basic Jenga kind of. No.
I was an urban dweller. You was out in the country doing sticks.
I was in the suburbs. Thank you very much. Mind your business. Anyways, so they throw these sticks or these coins and they generate a hexagram by repeatedly tossing coins or manipulating yarrow stalks to create one of the 64 possible combinations, producing a unique set of broken and solid lines. And then each hexagram in the I-Ching carries a specific symbolic meaning and is accompanied by a set of interpretations. These interpretations offer insights into situations, relationships, decisions, and life events. Users of the I-Ching seek guidance by meditating on the hexagram symbolism and applying its wisdom to their circumstances. So, very similar to how I read tarot. It's a little bit more deeper than like, don't buy that car tomorrow. It's just a little bit like, hey, your priorities may be off. Maybe you should focus on this. Maybe,
Yeah.
The I-Ching is actually a part of human design. So human design is a system that includes astrology, quantum physics, I-Ching, Trio Kabbalah. So it includes a lot of different divination tools to come up with this human design system that gives you your type and how you operate and how you move throughout the world. So that's like a little fun fact about the I-Ching. I actually have the Book of Changes and it's not for the faint of heart. You gotta like really, I think I sat down to read it like a novel and that wasn't the right way to do it. It's really more like a manual. And yeah. It can be dense, but I think it's really, really cool and really interesting that this really ancient system is still used today. So basically, like, it works.
Yeah. All right. So we've covered a few different divination methods, but this, by all means, is not the complete list of divination methods. We didn't go into like runes or even like looking in a crystal ball, which is actually a form of divination, right? There's so many different things that show up across cultures and across time. And I'm just like fascinated by it. I just think it really highlights that, humans across continents, across space and time, they have this ability to kind of access universal consciousness, the divine, or God, however you think about that concept, to really help make sense of life and like what we're experiencing here on this planet, right?
And even for the Christians, they're flipping the Bible and going to a verse. I mean, like, this is the verse that I needed today for my life, which is called bibliomancy.
Exactly.
So it's all over the place.
Absolutely.
Before we go, we just want to remind you to book that tarot card session or human design reading with moi. You can use the code Chakra15 until the end of September for 15% off a session.
And finally, guys, if you're loving the show, please subscribe and give us 5 stars wherever you listen.
Namaste.